All main transit lines from the Baumgarten gas hub are back in service after an explosion shut down the Austrian site. The cause of the blast is under investigation. Baumgarten is a major regional transfer node which takes gas from as far away as Russia towards Germany, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia and Italy, its biggest recipient. The country declared a state of emergency on Tuesday as gas prices rose by a reported 215% to €75 per megawatt hour. That's its highest ever recorded level. Fears that supplies would be restricted also sent prices soaring elsewhere in Europe.
This is the Pioneering Spirit, the world's largest marine construction vessel. It spans more than 6 jumbo jets and is capable of lifting entire oil rigs out of the water. Russia and Turkey are using it to accomplish a feat of their own, a gas pipeline that crosses the Black Sea.
Currently, the western part of Turkey is being supplied by Russian gas already, and it's being transited through Ukraine, Romania, Moldavia and Bulgaria. So it transits 4 countries before reaching the Turkish border. And our project will provide a direct line of natural gas straight to Turkey, the quickest route. So there will be more security and a more reliable energy infrastructure in place.
Energy experts believe this infrastructure will cement Russia's dominance as Europe's gas supplier and boost Turkey's prospects as a transit economy.
If Russia will be able to construct a second line, which is expected to feed the European market, not Turkish market, then Turkey will transform from end user to transit country, energy transit for Russia. I think this will serve for mutual dependence between the countries.
The pipeline spans nearly 1,000 kilometers, connecting gas fields near the Russian port city of Anapa with Kiyikoy in the southwest of Turkey. Turkstream sits more than 2 kilometers under the Black Sea, so it is the world's deepest wide-gauge pipeline. And it can deliver more than 3 billion cubic meters of gas each year, enough to power 10 cities as big as Dubai. As the link between Europe and Asia, Turkey has long been a bridge between some of the world's largest economies. The development of the Turkstream pipeline could make it an essential part of the energy market for the region and the world. Turkey's neighboring countries are expected to be the biggest beneficiaries of this project.
Specifically, we're thinking about, of course, Bulgaria and Greece. And the ones where Trans-Balkan pipeline would be like working in reverse mode, we think also like Romania and potentially Moldova. Also thinking about, because there is a interconnector being built between Bulgaria and Serbia, so the gas will go via Bulgarian system to Serbia. And from where, most importantly, to Hungary.
That could boost growth in energy-starved Eastern European economies and power deeper economic ties between Turkey and its neighbors.
Vladimir Putin hugging a leopard, dressed as a superhero, firing from a Putin blaster, and even dressed as Santa. These are all paintings showcased at an exhibition called Super Putin, which has opened in Moscow.
The idea behind the exhibition is that it would be cool and unusual to open a gallery showing devoted to the president, to show him not from the political side, but to show him from the side of how he is seen by the Russian people.
30 artists are featured in the exhibition depicting the Russian president's so-called superpowers. It opened on the same day as Putin announced he would run for another presidential term, which he is widely expected to win, and could see him at the top of Russian politics for almost a quarter of a century.
It's funny. It's all very ironic what we're seeing here. I like it.
I think these works are interesting, they are funny. I haven't seen Putin in such roles before.
A personality cult around the president has emerged in Russia, with Vladimir Putin often shown in macho propaganda stunts on state-controlled television. There are also pop songs dedicated to the leader and T-shirts printed with his image sold around the country. According to the pollster the Levada Center, Putin enjoys sky-high approval ratings in Russia that have not dropped below 80% since its annexation of Ukraine's Crimea and subsequent economic sanctions imposed by the West. But critics say this is largely due to the absence of independent media and serious political rivals to Putin in Russia.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan considers himself a champion of the Palestinian cause. On Wednesday, the Turkish president chaired an emergency gathering of the world's main pan-Islamic body in light of Donald Trump's decision last week to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In an earlier address, Erdogan refused to strike a conciliatory tone. Throughout the morning, leaders from every corner of the Muslim world trickled into Istanbul, one by one condemning Trump's contentious decision. For his part, Mahmoud Abbas said his people will not accept any role for the United States in the Middle East peace process from now on, a call echoed by all participants.
The individual steps taken by President Trump will not legitimize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, because it's an Arab, Palestinian, Islamic, Christian city, the eternal capital of Palestine.
Several key players at the summit, however, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the UAE, are unlikely to want to risk their key relationship with Washington for this cause. That said, King Salman bin Abdulaziz sent his country's message from Riyadh.
The kingdom incessantly calls for political solutions to the crises and problems in the region, and first and foremost to the Palestinian issue, with the restoration of the Palestinian people's legitimate rights. This includes the right to proclaim an independent state, of which East Jerusalem is the capital.
In a final declaration, the 57-member bloc urged recognition of East Jerusalem as Palestine's capital.
The Palestinian Authority president is demanding the United Nations take over peace negotiations, saying the United States is too biased toward Israel. Last week, President Donald Trump officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, breaking decades of U.S. tradition. But Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas went further, saying Trump broke international law. Abbas is likely pointing back to 1980, when Israel declared Jerusalem, complete and united, as the capital of Israel. Not long after, the UN Security Council ruled Israel's decree was null and void. That complete and united part is important because Palestinians want East Jerusalem to be the capital of their future state. Israelis, on the other hand, have long argued Jerusalem isn't a city that can be divided. In his announcement, Trump didn't explicitly weigh in on how or if the city would be divided. But Jerusalem is such a hot-button issue, American administration officials expected Palestinians to step away from the U.S.-led peace effort. Trump has said the U.S. would still support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides.
The White House has hit back at Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas after his comments at Wednesday's Islamic summit in Istanbul, saying the Palestinians will go to the United Nations Security Council and try to become a full member state following the Trump administration's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The White House says it's the kind of rhetoric that's prevented peace for decades. A senior Washington official added that the administration is not surprised by the comments, though, and that the president remains as committed to peace as ever.
An Israeli minister has suggested Saudi Arabia could sponsor the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. In an interview for Saudi paper Elaf, Intelligence Minister Israel Katz invited Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to visit Israel. He also said he was open to negotiations under Saudi leadership. His comments come after the Palestinian Authority president said the U.S. can no longer mediate the peace process. Israel and Saudi Arabia do not have official diplomatic ties, but have been developing clandestine contacts to confront the expanded role of Iran in the Middle East.
Meanwhile, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says the Palestinian cause must become the first priority of the Muslim world once again.
Despite the defeat of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria and the necessity of continuing the fight against other terrorist groups, we should not overlook the danger of the Zionist regime, such as the nuclear plan of this aggressive regime that poses threats against the entire world.
Now, in response, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is not impressed by statements made by Arab leaders at the summit in Turkey. He says it's better for the Palestinians to recognize reality and act for peace, not for radicalization, and to recognize that not only is Jerusalem the capital of Israel, but the country also maintains in Jerusalem freedom of worship for all religions.
Iran may be defying a call from the UN Security Council to halt its ballistic missile development. That's the warning from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, saying Iran has built technology that could be reconfigured to deliver nuclear weapons. The UN is now investigating whether Iran gave Houthi rebels in Yemen the ballistic missiles that targeted Riyadh's airport in November. Guterres says Iran is still complying with the 2015 nuclear deal, calling it the best way to ensure the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. He urged the US to remain committed to the agreement 2 months after President Trump refused to recertify the deal.
5 years after French soldiers were deployed to confront Al-Qaeda-linked fighters in Mali, the threat has spread. At a conference in Paris, French President Emmanuel Macron was joined by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, calling on regional and international leaders to support the so-called G5 Sahel force.
We need to win the war against terrorism in the Sahel zone, and it's in full swing. There are attacks every day. There are states that are today threatened, and there is a real presence of terrorists.
The G5 force was launched in Bamako, Mali in July, intended to deal with new armed groups, organised crime and human trafficking, but it has struggled to become a viable force. Made up of soldiers from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mauritania and Chad, the force will concentrate initially on some shared border regions. It's intended to grow to a 5,000-strong army by March. In its infancy, though, the force remains short of troops and funding.
As far as we are concerned at the G5 Sahel, we know that our time is running out. We realise that, with everything that has happened in the Middle East and the end of the war in Syria, there will be an influx of ISIS fighters towards us, and we don't want that.
UN peacekeepers and regional armies have been the target of recent attacks in the vast, hard-to-navigate Sahel region, where French forces remain in significant numbers. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have pledged financial support. The French president hopes to convince others that the problems of the Sahel are far-reaching and deserve their attention.
A U.S. airstrike destroyed an undetonated car bomb near the capital of Somalia. U.S. Africa Command confirmed that the drone strike, carried out on December 12th in coordination with the Somali government, hit and destroyed a minibus carrying explosives. Somali intelligence believed the vehicle may have been heading to the capital, Mogadishu, to carry out an attack. AFRICOM, in a statement Tuesday, said that the strike removed, quote, an imminent threat to the people of Mogadishu by the al-Shabaab extremist group. The U.S. added that no civilians were killed. The strike was part of a ramp-up of activity in Somalia against extremist groups. The U.S. military has carried out at least 30 airstrikes this year in the African country against al-Shabaab and the Islamic State.
The State Department is enacting a new travel warning system next month. The guidelines will rank foreign countries by risk. But State Department officials insist the revised system has been in the works for years. They say it is not a reaction to increased security risks around the world, nor to President Trump's Jerusalem announcement. And so are travelers going to still receive notifications in the event of an emergency like a natural disaster or a terror attack?
They'll receive alerts. They have to sign on to this program, right? There's a program, if you go to the State Department and you're traveling domestically or abroad, you can sign up for what's called STEP. It's a Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. This will send alerts directly to your phone. It's very important. All travelers really should do it. I think we're all very alert no matter where we go these days. It will send alerts as far as what's going on in particular countries. Now,
the Chinese government regularly calls Taiwan the most sensitive and important issue with the United States, and now they're raising the stakes even higher. and it could have major ramifications for our military, and here's why. On Monday, China's military sent fighter jets and bombers to patrol Taiwan, and a senior Chinese diplomat warned that Beijing would invade the self-governed island if any U.S. warships made port visits there. The White House is legally obligated by the Taiwan Relations Act, the TRA, as you know, to respond to any Chinese use of force against Taiwan. And while the agreement is not as binding as a mutual defense treaty, the TRA makes it clear that Washington is likely to intervene if China invades. Does China want a hot war with the United States?
No, but they do want to remind us that they get a say in what happens in Asia, because lately the United States has been kind of running the table on leading the agenda in North Korea, and the Chinese are reminding us, hey, we get a say on some other contentious issues, because specifically what has set them off is that Congress authorized the U.S. Navy to make port calls in Taiwan, and that hasn't happened in a long time. The Chinese have said, the Chinese diplomat Li Kejin in D.C. last week said, you do that the day you visit the port city of Kaohsiung in Taiwan is the day that the People's Liberation Army reclaims Taiwan.
President Donald Trump signed into law a sweeping defense policy bill that authorizes a $700 billion a year budget for the military. Trump touted the bill, which he signed on December 12th, as a step toward delivering on his promise to build up the military. Included is additional spending on missile defense programs to counter North Korea's growing nuclear weapons threat, as well as funding to add an additional 20,000 service members to the armed forces. However, while Trump's 2018 National Defense Authorization Act authorizes a military buildup, Congress has to pass a complementary funding bill to make that buildup a reality. Trump on Tuesday urged Congress to fully fund the measure and lift the budget caps known as sequestration that have forced limits on U.S. defense spending for several years.
Nonprofit group Human Rights Watch has alleged the Chinese government is collecting the DNA of civilians in its Xinjiang region on a massive scale. Chinese authorities have instituted a widespread security crackdown in Xinjiang in recent years, targeting the Uyghur ethnic minority. Human Rights Watch published their report on December 13th. They cited a Chinese government document containing guidelines for the collection of DNA, blood type, iris scans, and fingerprints of people between 12 and 65. Human Rights Watch said the government collected DNA and blood types through a free physical exams program. They also said it's unclear if the government informed patients they were collecting this data. One Uyghur man told Human Rights Watch the physical exams were mandatory and he was not told the results of his exam afterward. According to Chinese state media, about 18.8 million people participated in the program they call voluntary.
Mexican Senate committees on Wednesday approved a controversial security bill that human rights groups say risks granting excessive power to the armed forces in their already checkered role in combating organized crime in the country. The bill, which enjoys some cross-party support between conservatives and centrists, will now pass to the floor of the upper house of Congress for discussion and possible approval late on Wednesday or on Thursday morning. The law of internal security aims to regulate the armed forces' role in combating drug cartels, a conflict which has claimed well over 100,000 lives in the last decade. Senate committees approved the bill on Wednesday, a Senate spokesman said. Lawmakers who support the bill say it will set out clear rules that limit the use of soldiers to fight crime. Rights groups have strongly attacked the bill, saying it prioritizes the military's role in fighting the gangs over improving the police and could open the door to greater abuses and impunity by the armed forces.
Minor scuffles broke out at a protest in Buenos Aires as some 2,500 people marched against a World Trade Organization meeting. Local media report tear gas was fired to disperse the demonstrators when riots erupted at the end of a peaceful rally. 6 people are said to have been detained. It came after Argentina reportedly banned more than 60 activists from the WTO meeting amid fears of protests about the potential downsides of globalization.
The current wildfire plaguing Los Angeles neighborhoods was caused by someone illegally cooking at a homeless encampment. According to the HuffingtonPost.com, arson investigators visited a canyon by Interstate 405 just west of Bel Air. The officials determined people had been cooking and sleeping in the brush area nearby. The area they investigated was completely scorched. They haven't found who started the fire yet.
Man and baby's best friend. Watch as this family dog teaches her bestie how to crawl. Footage shows Simba, an 11-year-old Jack Russell, encouraging 11-month-old baby Danny on what to do to get from here to there. Michelle Thornley, Simba's owner and Danny's mom, says the pup has been great with all 3 of her kids. Watching the 2 interact melted her heart. Can't say we're not right along with her.